I'd like you to do the Pilgrim personality quiz sometime, and then when you come up to me, tell me which Pilgrim is really you, and I will give you that sticker, and then you can watch out for your character and see how your character does in the book, right? It'll be like, you can root for your character, feel sad for your character, be surprised by your character. Because that's kind of what the book is. It's a book about storytelling and telling stories and things that get revealed against your will sometimes as the flow of story pulls out content that maybe you didn't mean to give. But it all comes from Chaucer. So that's why I gave you a little handout with the opening lines of Chaucer. Josh said, yeah, I'm a supporter of poetry, so there's a little bit of poetry for you. You know, it's something that my medieval lit students are going to see pretty soon. Lines like these, lines like the first line there, one that April with his shore sota, the drota match have pierced to the rota, and that every vine in switch the core, of which thereto engendered is the floor. You know, those beautiful lines of Middle English poetry, and if you didn't understand a word of that, no problem, because I'll have some of you next week, I hope, and we will discuss. We will figure this out. So you encounter beautiful poetry like this. How do you make it accessible for teenagers? That was something that I wanted to think about. On the back side, I show one way you can play with Middle English, and that's actually writing in Middle English, like fake Middle English. So that's my fake Middle English poem. I pretend I'm John Gower, who's Chaucer's friend. He's like I think he's really cool, but he's kind of known for being the more stern friend. So this is a rant about the shape of donuts, that they should be round, never long. So maybe I'll read this one aloud if we get to Q&A and you want to hear. I do like the ranting of, a donut is ruled, it hath a hole, it doth guard his work upon the soul. You know, like this is it doesn't sound great. I mean, it sounds really great when you read in Middle English. So that's one way you can play with it and make it accessible to people who might think, oh, Chaucer, that seems a little stuffy. Gower, I don't even know what that is. So you can play with it that way. But for this book, I took a totally different approach, which is not using the language of Chaucer, but using the vibrant characters of Chaucer and this concept of people telling stories on the road and the magic that happens in relationships when people start telling these stories that are supposed to be, or they claim to be fiction, but they come from living beings, and so truth starts to come out in these stories. And I was not sure what I would read for you guys, so like any teacher, I asked my students, and of course they haven't read the book, right? So I'm like saying, Greg, what do I read? And he's like, I don't know. For something good. But then, I don't know if Holly is even here, but there's one student, her name's Holly, and she said, you know, why don't you read the first story, not the beginning, because we can get that on Amazon with the look inside, but the first story that you wrote. And the first one I wrote is actually the first story in the book. I wrote it out of order, but that one I wrote first. And that is basically Chaucer's Knight's Tale, if you're familiar with that. The Knight's Tale is a courtly tale, it's refined, it has love in it, or sort of has love in it. So I have a character, his name is Kai. He's a quarterback, right, because you have to have the knight, so what's the equivalent? So I thought, oh, this handsome, accomplished, straight-A student quarterback, right, it's just perfect. And he's going to tell a story. In the opening of the book, when we get this news of you guys have to tell stories, and Mr. Bailey says, when we go on this long bus ride to Washington, D.C., this will keep you all, proper in terms of your behavior. And Kai, you will go first. And Kai is very confident and cool, but he kind of shows that he's a little nervous about it. He wants to make sure he doesn't have to tell a story from life. And the teacher says, sure, you don't have to tell a story from life, just tell a story. So then he says, okay, good, I want to tell something that's not, something fictitious. So he launches into this story. So I'm going to just hop in, page 17 here. And the other thing you need to know is that there are interruptions in the story. I've taken out some of them because I think that hearing it out loud, you won't be able to follow as well. Like reading this out loud is quite different from seeing it on the page with two different kinds of fonts that let you know when a story is being told versus when the characters are bickering and arguing and calling out misogyny or what have you, which happens a lot in Chaucer's, in this take on Chaucer. So I'll kind of give you a little heads up, and then they discuss the story after. And sometimes that's the most interesting moment of all, when they're kind of doing a discussion of the story. Okay. The other thing to know is that when they are discussing the story or interrupting, that's all being narrated by Jeff Chaucer. And he's a writer, you'd be surprised to know. And he's on the bus, and he's an introvert, and he wants to be the best writer ever, and he doesn't believe he is. And he also just wants to kind of be a little more popular than he is. So he's a little bit of a struggling character. And unfortunately for him, he's sitting